see further when I cite examples. Then in some cases, they can also open fire on the disturbing factors after giving due warning if they find any suspicious person. And I will talk about why it is important. Then, if a person is a repeated offender and he is trying to disturb the law and order of the area, then the armed forces are entitled to use force until his death only in special cases after giving him proper warning. If the armed forces suspect that any military offender or a person who's who's threatening the peace of the area is hiding in any house or building, then that site can be destroyed or rechecked by those armed forces. Any vehicle can be stopped and searched for. And even in the case of wrongful action by the armed forces, that is decided upon the consequence and no legal action is taken against them, at least there and then. The case can be taken up further. And I will elaborate why this particular clause is of importance. Now, why are we giving so much permission to the armed forces? The answer is simple: to maintain law and order in areas where there is already anarchy prevalent. 350 Indian Army soldiers petitioned the Supreme Court to not dilute this particular act, and that itself is a proof of showing why this act is important. That nobody here is saying that it gives immunity to the Indian military to kill. We are just giving them the right. Rather, we are giving them the charge to balance a situation, to handle a situation, which in normal cases cannot be handled. Now, how is it important that only that we give them the right to kill, or rather, observe a person as suspicious and then move ahead to take such an action which might be considered wrongful in particular cases? Now, the legal process and the constitutional provisions dictate that only an officer of the level of sub-divisional magistrate or above can give the written orders to the army to open fire at a mob which is unruly, or any civilians which are disturbing peace. But it is absolutely impossible and illogical for the SDM to be present at all moments, again, emphasizing on how the situation can get anarchic and bullets can fly at any time. So hence, it depicts the unpredictable nature of such an urgency. This act is an enabling act. It gives the officers the right to maintain law and order in an area. It does not give them a license to kill, and it in no way justifies any wrongful action like which the armed forces and the army officers have been accused for example, rapes or murders. Now I will talk about what are the safeguards that are there, and I will try to conclude them given the time constraint. Any violator of the CRPC or IPC Act can be booked in an instance if they have conducted any wrongful action. There was also a famous case in 1990s of the ketchup colonel who used to fake encounters to get gallantry awards. And afterwards, when this case came to light and it was tried upon, he was convicted under the CRPC. So even if there was also a Jawan who had raped a Kashmiri girl, and in the 1990s, again, he was sentenced and tried within 3 months. Also, the officers, there are exams for them which have situational examples of what they should do in a particular situation and what they shouldn't, and how they are supposed to tackle the terrorists or the militants who are armed. Lastly, I would just say that this act ensures, and this house believes, that the armed forces, their morale is boosted and they understand and they realize that it is their responsibility to maintain law and order in the state and not use it for the wrongful purposes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for starting the debate. Points well noted. Thank you so much for presenting the proposition side. May we please have the first constructive from the opposition side, before which I'd like to ask, are there any points on the floor? Okay then, may we please have the LO. I'll be doing a backward count, Utkarsh, post which you can begin your debate.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
All right.
Okay then, are you ready? Please begin.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can. I promise that the meaning of these words spoken by Martin Luther King Jr. will not be lost on you by the end of both of our speeches. As the leader of the opposition, I will now lay down what it is that me and my teammate will be covering in this debate. We will first define the terms at hand. We will then provide context for our arguments, provide arguments, and then finally talk about the failures as well as provide constructive solutions for what it is that we have to say. So what is the meaning of the word revoke? To revoke means to officially cancel something. That something can be a statement or it can be a decree or an act such as the AFSPA. The AFSPA is nothing but an abbreviation for the Army Forces Special Protection Act and Special Forces Act. So I'm not going to go into what the meaning of the word disturbed is, as the Prime Minister was kind enough to already define it. So when India went up to the United Nations Human Rights Council, and they stated that this is our second report, the Human Rights Council said this is all well and good, but the AFSPA very clearly defies Article 4. But what is Article 4? Article 4 basically enables any country under the covenant of the UNHRC to derogate from their responsibilities during a time of responsibility. But this is given during a time of emergency. But this is given that they do not derogate from Articles 6, 7, 8, 11, 15, 16, and 18. And these are all very basic articles such as the right to freedom, the right to life, the freedom from torture, the right to be treated as a human being in the eyes of law, and the right to not be arrested unless a crime has been committed. But instead, what we are slapped with was the AFSPA, which is nothing but colonial era law that has lasted for so long, baselessly. The intention of the AFSPA was different from what it is carrying on to be today. Now, there are certain powers that are granted by the AFSPA, and these powers affect the people in these disturbed states. So when the citizens of Kashmir were asked how they were affected, they said they outright hated the AFSPA because it took away their basic rights. They felt like they were chained from the moment they were born to the way they raised their children and the way they lived their lives. They found these laws to be draconian as well as evil. So the powers that the AFSPA grants are basically warrantless permission to stop and search, and when deemed fit, to destroy and give fair warning and then open fire. Now, these are all things that look good in text, but when it's carried out, nothing goes according to text, and there is factual proof that will be provided later on based on what I've just said. So I have various arguments to state. First off, the power that is provided to the army under the AFSPA is being misused. There are fake encounters taking place, and sexual exploitation has been proven. To put things into perspective, the Nirbhaya rape case rapists took almost 8 years to get hung. Now imagine when these people are given a free pass to do what they want and get rid of the people who can voice out the truth of what happened. 8 years would be a joke because justice will never be served because the truth will never come out. Apart from this, the entire thing is essentially one massive international human rights violation. And it's essentially a higher equivalent of the Rowlatt Act, which was present in the British era, wherein they could stop and search someone and then take decisions based on whether or not they found that person was suspicious. And there was no necessary probable cause. All they had to think was, this person looks suspicious and I have a doubt on him, so I'm going to go see whether there's something wrong. Regardless of what the actual situation was, they could act on it. This also curbs secular freedom because under the definition of disturbance, religion is one of the key factors where differences are put into perspective. So when it comes to voicing your opinion based on your religion, if any insurgent group in the disturbed areas has a similar opinion, many a times the army under the AFSPA takes it as an opportunity to state that you are aligning yourself with these insurgent groups and thus ends up taking harsh action towards you. There is an association called the Extrajudicial Execution Victims Family Association. And in this association, they have very openly claimed that there are over 1,500 people missing. And these 1,500 people whose wives are termed as half widows because their bodies have not been found, but these people have just disappeared off the face of the earth. There is mass belief that there are mass graves all over Kashmir and bodies have been found, but there has been no way to identify the identity of each of these bodies. The AFSPA has been used as a tool of state abuse, oppression, and discrimination. As a fair debater, I will not state that the AFSPA in itself is evil. It was created with good intent. But what it is living up to be right now is nothing as to the original vision. Lives are being lost, and yet we have individuals saying that all of it looks fair and rosy on paper. Tripura got rid of the AFSPA, and even though they still have mild insurgencies, they are much happier. The state is happier, the state is more prosperous, and they have shifted their viewpoint to what matters, to a peace economy instead of a conflict economy. And with that, I'd like to say I'm extremely proud to oppose. Thank you.
Hello, you still have 22 seconds remaining on your speech. Would you like to yield 2 points of
I'd like to yield
information?
the rest of the time.
2 points of information, or would you like to conclude?
I'd like to conclude, but I'm open to points of information.
Are there any points of information from the opposing team? None? Okay, thank you so much for your speech. Participants, I highly recommend asking points of information during the course of your debate and even answering a few of them. May we please have the member of the government now for the second constructive on the government side?
Yeah, hi. I will really not be able to switch on my video. I have a class running in parallel, so my internet won't be.
Okay. I understand. 1 second. Give me a second, Happy. If any points of information exist from the opposition side, you can simply turn on your video camera. I'll be able to see you. Okay then. I'll be doing a backward count, post which you can begin your debate. 3, 2, 1. Please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And good afternoon to one and all present in the House. I would construct my speech by first elaborating upon what my Prime Minister has discussed upon AFCPA, and thereafter I'm going to counter some of the points that have been brought up by the Leader of Opposition. So starting up, my Prime Minister has well explained the concept as well as the scope of the Act. Thereafter, the pros have well been defined. However, elaborating upon them, the very need for this act came because there was a need to protect the boundaries of the country. There were issues with insurgency which are still present today, and there was a need to boost the morale of the army. Otherwise, our country wouldn't have been protected and our map wouldn't have been what it is right now. So therefore, this really makes a case for why we actually need this act in the first place. Whenever we start about discussing about any law that has been brought in place, the first point that needs to be discussed has to be the objective of the act in the first place, which I will take your POI afterwards. Thank you so much. Coming back to my point, whenever we start an act, we have to go back to the objective of why this came into play in the first place. And why this came into place was because there was a need to protect the boundaries of the country. There have been disturbed areas within the country. This, however, has not been addressed by the opposition at all. The opposition has very well stated towards the end of their speech that they do not have a problem with the concept. They only have a problem with the implementation. That totally proves that there is no problem if this act is implemented. I will take your POI afterwards. Thank you. Yeah, you can go ahead with your POI if it's related to this point.
The member of government stated with a reference to my speech that I accept the concept but not the implementation, whereas that is not what I stated in my speech. Factually incorrect.
Please ask a question, Utkarsh. This is points of orders can be raised after the debate. Do you have
Apologies.
a question?
All right. I'll raise a point of order. My bad.
Okay then. Apologies. Is there a POI?
None. Sorry.
Okay then. Happy, please go forward with your speech.
All right. Thank you, Leader of the Opposition, for that point of order. I'd still like to address it towards the end of the speech. The Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime, the Leader of Opposition stated that if it's implemented in the right manner, then there is nothing wrong with the concept. He also stated that the way it's being implemented and the way it's being used within India is a problem. Coming to the checks and balances in place. So there are checks and balances, and the proof for that is Major Lethal Gogoi. He was court-martialed because in Kashmir he was accused of fraternizing with a woman, raping a woman, which was actually goes against the law, and definitely he was court-martialed even though he was a major. So that proves the point that yes, it is implemented in a better manner in India. Also, let's talk about some of the points that the Deputy Prime Minister has started his speech with. He said that darkness cannot kill darkness, hate cannot kill hate. Well, if you're comparing the Indian army with terrorists, with insurgents, and saying that hate cannot kill hate. If you're equating the two, then I believe there is a basic misconception towards understanding the basic uh, human notions in itself within the country. And this is simply outrageous to compare army with terrorists. Thereafter, there was talk of, there were air quotes used when the leader of opposition said that the army gives fair warning before killing. Well, there was no source, no numbers when they stated that there have been rapes and killings. Uh, I fail to understand that there was not even a single source quoted within their speech. However, I would like to quote a source here. When they discussed about the mass graves, this was actually taken up by the BBC, and this has actually been well used, well countered by a number of opinion leaders around the globe. There was discussion of the UN. They said that the UN is against this act. Well, definitely the UN is against this act, but how effective has the UN been? Let's talk about Kashmir, which has been the biggest point of contention in India. And the UN a few years ago actually gave the case to India and said that the Pakistan is not there rightly, and they should stop insurgency. However, nothing has been done. The UN has talked time and again, but nothing has been done over years, over decades. There have been speeches by both India and Pakistan in the UN Council. No solution has been reached. So what does our leader of opposition suggest? We follow UN, Pakistan doesn't. Their insurgents come to India. Well, let's change all the boundaries of our map already. Uh, Talking further uh, about the fact that talking about the fact of uh, oh, sorry, I would like to take the POI by the member of opposition.
You'll have to yield your time to POIs.
All right.
Okay then. Member of opposition, you have a POI?
Yeah, I have one POI and a couple of POs.
Please start with the POI. POs will
Okay.
be ruled upon after the speech is over.
Okay, so the member of the government stated that the map is in the form right now because because AFSPA has taken charge, and if it didn't take charge, then the map would be in a more disoriented state. This is actually incorrect, whereas the borders are actually not covered by AFSPA. They are by the military.
Member of government, is this a POI or is this a PO?
Oh yeah, sorry, this is a PO.
Please, POs will be taken out of the speech. Please,
All right.
please ask a POI during this time.
No, I only have POs.
Then I'm afraid I will not be able to recognize you right now.
Apologies.
Sorry about that.
If the house allows, I would still like to address that.
Okay then. I think will you conclude your speech? Should I count your speech as concluded? Okay then. Now since the speech is concluded, we can rule on the POs. May we please have the POs by the member of the government?
Yeah, as already stated, the map is the format of the map, and the international conflicts are dealt by army, and AFSPA has no part to play in it. That's one. Second, the member of the government stated that some major was court-martialed. Well, this is just one case. We are talking about hundreds of rapes and over 1,000 extrajudicial killings, not just one. Okay, and third, the member of government stated UN. I think the member of government fails to understand how international diplomacy works, and that the best way to go ahead is actually go and bring out of this issue in the UN and bring out a logical solution, not the AFSPA.
Can you please? Okay, first, I believe that some of these are opinions, but anyway, the first point of order. Can you please reiterate that?
As I said earlier, the international conflict has something to do with the border army and not with AFSPA.
Speaker, would you like to clarify?
Sure. So the member of the opposition actually has in his digital picture a picture of Shashi Tharoor. Well, I would like to talk about him. He gave an interview with Al Jazeera, and he stated himself that had AFSA not been there, the borders would have been different. So I rest my case there itself. Thank you for your time.
What does my DP have to do with this particular debate? My DP was used for some previous competition. Can the member of government stick to the particular debate and bring logical conclusions?
May you please have the judicature rule on this?
I would not like further discussion about this question at least. I personally feel that it wasn't answered as such by that remark from the member of the government, but I feel we could move on to the second point of order.
I have a
Thank
point
you.
of order.
Please come on camera. I'm not able to. Is that by Utkarsh?
Am I visible now?
Yes.
All right. Point of order. I would just like to state that the majority of the constructive speech was used in rebuttal, whereas the purpose of constructive speech is to put out new points, and we're instructed not to rebut the opponent's
Leader of
speech.
opposition, as the adjudicator, I'm making note of that. So let's not use that as a point of order. That's something to do with the structure of the debate as a whole. So that will affect their scoring, but let's not bring that out as a point and all of that and school them on how the debate should function. So let's just
Apologies.
continue.
I was just told that points of order went. I thought points of orders were meant to clarify anything that went wrong with the structure of the debate.
Yeah. Again, let's stick to content related specific questions and not about their structure as such, because anyway, now that it's passed, it's been noted by the adjudicator. Thanks for the point. Let's move on to questions, please.
Any other points or orders on the floor before we move on? None? Okay then. Member of government, can you please take the stage? Are you ready? Sorry, member of opposition, can you please take the stage? Are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
Okay then. 3, 2, 1, please begin.
71 years, that's right. 71 years since this AFSPA has been implemented in our country. It was supposed to bring about prosperity in the disturbed areas. Not only has it not brought up prosperity, it has deteriorated in such cases. When AFSPA was imposed on the Northeast, there were only 2 insurgent groups. Now there are over 40 such groups. Over the years, the definition of normalcy in this area has been changed. AFSPA has been imposed and changed significantly. Everyday struggles there has been taking place in Northeast India and the disturbed areas, such as extrajudicial killings, torture, and rape, seem to have become the new normal in these places. The proliferation of armed insurgencies and violence shows that AFSPA has absolutely failed to be the solution. It has not only proved to be a failed instrument of state, but has also alienated large sections of citizens from their governments who are supposed to be their protectors. Scrapping of this ASPA would remove sentiments of discrimination and alienation of people in disturbed states. In words of Supreme Court itself, it does not matter whether the victim was a common person or a militant or a terrorist, nor does it matter whether the aggressor was a common person or the state. The law is the same. I saw someone raising their hand.
Please go ahead, Mansi.
Yeah, could you please cite the numbers exactly, what you're talking about the rapes, and also which source did you take them up from?
I believe I'm going to be talking about that in my speech.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So can I continue with this time around?
Please. Yes, please.
All right. It does not matter whether the aggressor was a common person or the state. The law is the same for both and is equally applicable to both. This is the requirement of a democracy and the requirement of preservation of the rule of law and the preservation of individual liberties. The gross human rights violations brought by the ASPA has been admitted by the governments, the judiciary, and even the army. The same five-judge bench Supreme Court had said in 2016 that our armed forces are deployed and employed to kill citizens of our country on the more allegation or suspicion that they were just enemy, not only to rule out the law, but also our democracy would be in grave danger. The truth is that there is politics in which sustains in this act and is used for various regimes. For the army, it is an easy tool to exercise dominance over unrestrained liberty. For the state governments, it is an important way to get additional funds from central government. And for the center, AFSPA is just a way to deliver for covering its undelivered governance and development for people. The Tripura government has removed AFSPA and it's just a leap of faith. I'm not telling that insurgency has completely been revoked in the place, but it's definitely better from when AFSPA was included in the state. India wants to move ahead. Okay, during the economy of conflict that has characterized many states. In Nagaland's case, Since the 1950s, the embrace of economy of peace has been taking place. Even Manipur, on the papers, it is a state with maximum rebel groups. Many of whom are resided in Myanmar, and with a flourishing narcotics chain, which includes government personnel, politicians, administrators, and rebels alike. But it wants to break free right now. I would like to talk about the United States leaked diplomatic cable. Indian government employees themselves agreed to the grave violations of human rights by the armed forces. The Governor S.S. Sidhu admitted this to the American Consul General of Kolkata, Henry Jardine. International Red Cross reported to U.S. diplomats about grave situation in Kashmir, which includes electrocution, beatings, and rapes of hundreds of detainees by the armed forces. 6 people were encountered in Manipur who had no previous criminal records. The Supreme Court's judge and the ex-Supreme Court Judge Santosh Hegde and J.M. Lingdor took over this commission and found this out, that the killers are not even persecuted, who are part of the armed forces again. After ASPA could not achieve what its desired goals over the 71 years of its implementation, so the state government has so the state government of the disturbed area, along with the central government, should find out an alternative. Another possible solution is to look at an alternative medicine. Allopathy is a great system of medicine, but that doesn't mean other systems of medicine has not been accepted, whereas it has. So let's try a different solution in disturbed areas like J&K and Northeast India. We cannot contain insurgency related violence by alienating the citizens from the government, but instead by including them. Every debate is supposed to come to a conclusion and logical solutions. So the solutions my team and I feel are: one, the hilly and disturbed areas and the remote areas should not be declared as disturbed areas, but as special development zones, so that people are actually included and development actually takes place. Two, the restrictions based on mobile phones and internet should be reviewed, because that is basically shutting down the freedom of speech. 3, a judicial commission should be enforced to supervise the identification of bodies buried in the unmarked graves, so that we can actually find out how many people were murdered in the form of extrajudicial killings. So 5th, the central government should tap the hydroelectricity in Northeast India, because only 15% of it has been utilized till now. If equity capital by the central government is enforced in such place, we can actually increase it to 85%. Stating all these points, my teammate and I felt the criteria for this debate is: 1, to define the relevant terms; 2, to clear any ambiguity about the topic by providing detailed context; 3, providing opinions backed by historical facts and verified statements; and 4, providing constructive solutions. And we wholeheartedly feel that we have fulfilled them. With this, I would like to say I'm extremely proud to oppose. Thank you.
You have 6 seconds left. Would you like to conclude, or would you like to take a POI?
I'll yield my time to POIs.
Are there any POIs on the floor?
Yes, I don't. I have a question. Did you mention about the report which I asked you in the beginning, where you lifted the numbers of rapes from?
Raj, you have 6 seconds to answer. Please go ahead.
As I told, first, 1 second. I told about the international. Excuse 1 second. I'm just going through my speech. Yeah, as I told, the killings of 6 people in Manipur were taken by the commission undertaken by Supreme Court Judge Santosh Hegde and J.M. Lingdor. So that's about the murders as stated, and the rapes is from, as I told.
I'm sorry, but wasn't it only 6 seconds that were given to him?
I assume that you would want him to answer the question. That's why I gave him some more time. We can conclude if you're done with if you're happy with the response.
No, I thought it's a restriction, which is I'm still waiting for the answer, but again, it's up to you.
I can give him 10 more seconds if you'd want.
Sure.
Okay, Raj, I'm giving you 10 more seconds. Please answer.
Okay, so as I told, the United States leaked diplomatic cables. The International Red Cross reported to US diplomats in India about the situation in Kashmir,
okay,
which stated the 100 plus detainees on whom there were exercises of beatings, rapes, and torture.
Thank you so much, Raj. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Raj. May we please have the leader of the opposition for the first rebuttal. Are there any points of order or points of personal privilege on the floor before we start? None? Okay then.
Just one thing. When the member of the government talked about, I just want to clarify in this point. When he talked about the reference to Shashi Tharoor, his idea was not to ridicule, but just to point out that struck him that Shashi Tharoor made those particular remarks. So I apologize if it was taken in any other sense. So
Noted,
just
noted,
yeah.
noted. No problem. No problem. You could use your time in your rebuttal to bring forward these clarifications as well.
Sure, okay.
Okay then. So it's a 4-minute rebuttal speech. No PUIs during this time. I'll be doing a backward count, post which you can begin your rebuttal. 3, 3, 2, 1. Please begin.
Darkness cannot be chased out by darkness, only light can chase it out. Hate cannot be chased out by hate, only love can chase it out. And I said this with the intention with regards to border tensions, with regards to violence at the border, and how solving it with more violence is not the answer. At no point would I like it to be understood that I referred to the army as something of hate. Being a member of the government, being a member of opposition, I have immense respect for the army. I just believe that not everyone is incorruptible. Everyone at one point, at a certain price, is corruptible. Now, where that threshold is reached is different for each individual. And for some people, that threshold is never reached, which is why they come out as incorruptible. Now, the member of the opposition went ahead and raised certain points, like for the US leaks and for what the people said for what the members of what the judges of the Supreme Court said. So when they said this, all of this was taken from the interlocutor's report of 2010. From this report is where we derive a majority of the constructive solutions because they have not been implemented till date. I would like to re-clarify why I said I understand why the AFSPA was made in the first place or introduced in the first place and why it's not clear and why it's not correct to be used now. The AFSPA was introduced with the intention of reducing violence, with the intention of bringing about peace and protection. Instead, routine violence is being used to assert dominance over the people, over the residents. And they live in fear, living in constant fear by the people who are meant to protect you. There is honestly no higher level of fear to live in, that because it is the most degrading way for an individual to live. Now, the AFPA was introduced to boost the morale of the army. I say this as a quotation of what the member of the government said. The ASPA was introduced to boost the morale of the army. That is a factually incorrect statement, and that cannot be said as an opinionated statement. Reports that are submitted by the army will never be self-derogatory. An individual will never own up to a mistake unless they see it fit. And obviously, with the kind of offenses being pulled out at Kashmir and at Myanmar, there is no reason for the army to come forth about their mistakes. So obviously, they cover it up. It is whatever few report-based examples we have that we put forward in our speeches. And we do so for the point of helping individuals understand our point of view and not for the purpose of ridicule or for the purpose of dragging the opponent speaker down. Now, the UN in itself is a diplomatic body. The UN is not a form of a dictator. It cannot simply act as and when it pleases without permissions of the country. It can only make suggestions. Why do you think I made it so clear that in the beginning of my speech, the UNHRC did not approve of the way that the ASPA was conducted because it violated Article 4? But did they kick out India from the UN or from the UNHRC for that? No, because they understand that a country will run the way it wants to run. All they can do is provide suggestions to facilitate peace. That is the purpose of a diplomatic body. And with referring to the air quotes I used air quotes in my speech for the simple reason of trying to dramatize the effect of what the ASPA can have on individuals. When I say due warning with air quotes, that's because the same way an encounter is done, that's the same way due warning is given. They can fire and they can kill someone and then stand over the body and say, oh, we gave due warning, and there's no one there to disprove what has happened. With all these points being said, I believe I've covered the majority of the points of our debate. And I'd again like to reiterate that our solutions are peace-based, and that is why we started with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. So that I'm extremely proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leader of Opposition, for summing up your side's argument. Thank you so much, Member of Opposition, for being part of this debate. Points well noted by the opposing team. May we please have the final speech of the afternoon, the Prime Minister's rebuttal. I'll be doing a 3 to 1 backward count, post which you can begin. 3, 2, 1, please begin.
As much as I'm proud of the fact that we were able to bring across the table what AFSPA is, why it is important, and why in a country like ours, where the number of cases of terrorists being and people using the armed appliances against our military are rising, why AFSPA holds all the more importance to control and handle peace in those situations. I appreciate the arguments brought forth by the opposition, and I would like to re-emphasize on the arguments that were stated by the proposition and why we are advocating that ASFA doesn't need to be revoked. Firstly, I would like to cite that terrorists would not have been rooted out in Punjab or Mizoram if the AFSPA wasn't there, if the tough measures weren't taken by the army. The AFSPA is in force in the areas, as I have mentioned in my speech, where abnormality prevails and where the terrorists do not observe the incities of the constitution. I will come to the point where I will talk about why freedom of speech and how it is linked to our particular case. Freedom of speech under Article 19.1 states and gives the right to an individual of the country to express his or her views and to exercise the freedom to use any form of medium to raise his argument or share his ideas. But it comes with reasonable restrictions. Speech that incites minimum lawless action is something which the constitution does not propagate. We cannot have individuals shouting slogans against the army, cutting off their heads, taking those heads of our army soldiers on whom the entire security of the country depends, and just say that let's revoke as AFSPA and let's allow our army officers to be executed. Let's allow our army officers to be killed because certain individuals of a certain sect believe in an idea and there was nobody there to cross question them. And that is what I think we are all discussing here, that should they be even given a chance to express why they are raising it or why their arguments are on floor. The army, when it deals with an adversary, cannot afford to ask questions first and satisfy themselves about the intentions, malified or otherwise, before a perceived enemy is shot. If we follow this, a soldier would be dead before he realizes it. Imagine asking our army, a Kashmiri or a Manipuri terrorist armed with lethal weapons on his intent, whether he means to kill the civilians or will he make the discrimination between a child and an enemy. Does that person understand that it is revolting against not just the government, but human beings as such? If they understand that, I am all for allowing the army to question them first, but I'm sure they do not. And that is why the army has to resort to third degree measures to get information from those people and not just sit and question them with tea and biscuits. It is also important that if we give those privileges to individuals and allow the army to take a back foot, we are not solving the case. We are just extending the matter. And that is what is the need of the hour. Not extending the matter, but solving the problems there and then. To the opposition which says that AFSPA is not logical, I say the AFSPA is the need of the hour in order to maintain peace in the country. It must be understood that why the army takes certain actions and why it extracts information from those terrorists using third degree methods, why the act hasn't been in place so far, and why is or does the state government, as I mentioned in my speech, give permission to the AFSPA, to the army forces to come and take charge of the state when they themselves cannot handle it. Because that is how law and order is maintained. Law and order is not a cake that we all can distribute and sit happily about. It comes at a price. I understand the price should not be human beings, but the price also cannot be the freedom of the country and the security of the nation. With that, I rest my speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for the final speech of the evening. Clearly a very passionate speech. Thank you both parties for being part of this debate. I had a lot of fun, a lot of passion, a lot of points, a lot of logic used. Yes, Raj?
I have 3 points of orders.
Sure, we'll be ruling on them.
Okay. So the Prime Minister mentioned multiple times about the word terrorist. Firstly, the whole point of AFSPA is that the army doesn't have to find proof that who terrorist is. They just have to feel someone is a terrorist. That's the issue we have. Second, well, while talking about freedom of speech, we were talking about the internet shutdowns and how will one person even voice out opinion if there is there's no media to express their opinion. Third, uh, multiple times the prime minister mentioned that none of the terrorists should escape, no criminals should escape. Our whole judiciary system is based on 100 criminals can escape, but not one innocent shall be punished, and that is what AFSPA is stealing from us. Thank you.
I have a question here, not a question, rather just a statement to make. Why are these arguments coming right now? I mean, after my speech.
Precisely. That's what. Precisely.
This is like
Precisely.
trying to sway whatever
Precisely,
I said. I can
precisely.
also counter them right away. So
Precisely. Adjudicator, would you like to rule on this?
Apart from the third one, I mean, most of them felt like opinions to me, so I don't think we
Exactly.
have a strong point of order as such. So I think we should just conclude the debate at this point. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, debaters, that's it for the afternoon. Thank you so much for being part of this. May we please have our closing remarks and feedback from the judge. You're mute, Gautam.
Sorry. If you can turn on your video, do so, but otherwise just feel free to listen. But anyway, first of all, very impressed by all of you. AFSPA is a hot topic. It was 5 years back. It will be 5 years from now. It's definitely not something that we can come to a conclusion on today or tomorrow, but definitely you guys brought out the full value of the topic, which is nice to see. Also the structuring in each of your speeches, like having judged other debates as well, I can see that all of you went about very professionally about handling your speech from you will define your objectives, you'll speak about the topic, you'll bring in all aspects of it, you'll speak about exactly, like basically the stakeholder burden, the proof of burden, the stakeholder impacted, all of that was very clearly stated. The definitions were very nicely mentioned by the PM as well as the LO. So in terms of the fundamentals of how the debate should flow, very strong, all of you. So good job on that. A few things that I want to say is things like, it was very nice to see that Raj from the opposition mentioned solutions from the opposition's point of view in terms of what can be done ideally. Like he understood, he acknowledged the fact that yes, AFSPA objective was XYZ. It did serve its objective to a certain measure, but the demerits of it that come as a side negative is way too high for it to continue anymore. Hence, solution 1, solution 2, solution 3, and Utkarsh pointed out where they took the solutions from and how they are reliable and all of that. So all I have to say, keeping that in mind, is that the government, to strengthen its case, could have basically played with the word revoke by saying revoke is an utter cancellation of the AFSPA as a whole. Why can't you, instead of cancelling AFSPA, have an ancillary body that is going to make it harder for the armed forces to actually do anything in terms of false premises and basically reduce the cases of such false occurrences happening? If you had a solution model that way, that puts the burden on the opposition to then come and say, no, we still don't like AFSPA. Like, even if you can reduce the negatives of it, we still want it utterly cancelled, which is a harder job for them to do. But because there was no solution model proposed from the government, the only solutions I get at the end of this debate are the ones that the opposition's proposed, which kind of tilts the balance towards their side. And coming to the opposition again, like both of you did a good job. Again, all four of you pretty nicely put the speeches in terms of the structuring. Only thing is, in the middle, like when you're using examples, in both cases, actually, in the government's case as well, it's like, like we talk about massive numbers of mistakes, but you guys give one example of something correct happening and then saying, okay, like this is it. And also, when Mansi asked Raj, that is basically when the PM asked the MO about citing a certain source, the first thing you should not, like the worst thing that can happen in a debate is somebody questioning your credibility of a certain point and then you not having a solid answer to give them that second. So, like when you took time to figure out where I exactly took that point from, it shows a little shakiness in the whole argument. Gives me that feeling of, okay, even he's not sure where he got it from. I don't know if I should believe it or not. But those are probably facts. I know you probably didn't just make it up, you took it from somewhere. But next time, cite your sources and don't let them raise a question, because even in your speech, it gives me as the adjudicator a lot more credibility when you mention that as per the XYZ report, which is a credible body creating a report based on ABC facts, this is what happened. No questions asked. I believe you 101%. I may not even know what that body is or what sort of corruption and money swindling happens there, but there's a credibility associated to that source. So keep your sources handy. Don't let your credibility be questioned. But apart from that, yeah, like this solution side of things is one part where the government could have done better. And in terms of the opposition, again, questioning, be very clear on what is a POI, what is a point of order, like where do you want to give your opinions. Like Mansi was actually very right when she said the debate is over. In the form of a point of order, if you're going to give me your opinions, it's like you're just trying to put in one age adjudicator. I hope you're noting that this is wrong. Like it gives that vibe. So that makes it a little unprofessional. So next time, be very stern. If you wanted a POI POI wasn't allowed on a rebuttal. If you had a point of order, be very strong. Voice it in a very one proper statement. Sumer gets it, I get it, that manner. Or don't at all, because why do you want to bring down on your positives by doing something like that? So that's pretty much it from my side. If any of you all have anything to ask, you can, but otherwise, yeah, I think we can conclude with this.
Yeah, I have just one question.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's very opinion based, right? Like sometimes the scales are very tilted to one side, and one side doesn't necessarily have facts to back them up, but they have very general sources. Like if I look for anything on Google, right now, apart from the report I cited, nothing else had any source provided. So how do I defend it when if I don't know, what would you do in my position? What would you do to defend it?
Again, see, first of all, saying that one side didn't have facts in this case, at least I don't believe is very true. I understand one side might have more information to support them, but you had facts on both sides of this matter. But even if you're in a situation where you know that the credibility of information is on the opponent side and you don't have a lot of reports backing you up, go logical. Speak in terms of, I'm not saying go full on emotional and be like, do you know the pain of the mother who died? Don't do that. But other than that, you can bring in logic and draw parallelisms. Like you can basically say that, like, okay, you're suggesting this. So as per you that, now can you tell me that this will work based on that? And if you itself bring in a hypothetical, you itself destroy that hypothetical, overall, you're leaving an impression of the only other alternative was that hypothetical and it doesn't make sense. Hence, I'm right. So
Okay.
think of it that way. It all comes down to how convincing you are. And to convince you, like ideally, I notice a lot of people doing, okay, in a hypothetical situation, would you do this? And it becomes a question. Instead of that, bring it into your speech saying, all right, I agree with you. You're saying this. So this happens. And then draw a storyline which ends at absolute destruction, which then strengthens your case, right? So anybody listening is like, oh, okay, like I thought he was going somewhere with it, supporting them, but the way that ended, we definitely should stick to whatever the opposition is saying, hence they're right. So think of it that way, like that convincing side of things should be more highlighted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Results will be out today at 8 p.m. Keep an eye on the group. Best of luck to everybody and see you guys.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Thank you, Mansi.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, all participants, to the quarterfinals of the Compass Online Parliamentary Debate Open category. Firstly, congratulations for qualifying for the quarterfinals. Both teams have performed extremely well in the previous rounds. The motion on the floor lies. This House refutes the claim that a rise in the right-wing ideology of India has led to religious conflicts. May we please have the proposition recognize themselves.
Hello, I'm going to be playing the role of the Prime Minister, and I'm Kritan.
Thanks, Ritin. Welcome to the
Pranav
debate.
Hi, Pranav here. I'm the Deputy Prime Minister.
Pranav, thank you so much for joining us. Opposition side, please recognize yourself.
I am Vishnu, and I'll be going as leader of opposition.
Hi, Vishnu. Welcome to the debate.
Hi, I'm Deepansh. I will be the deputy leader of opposition.
Thank you for joining us, Dipansh. Participants, today we have a well-known figure in the Bangalore debating circuit, someone I've seen personally debate over the years. I can guarantee he's absolutely fantastic. His command over the language and his vocabulary is something I envy, and his opponents are people I pity. Gautam is a true believer in the power of words and the influence of persuasion. He is an avid debater with multiple best speaker victories to his name and a cumulative record of more than 50 wins across events in the school cultural circuit of Chennai and the university cultural circuit of Bangalore. He is a business graduate from Christ University and has held the position of Debating Society president. He is currently working at KPMG in the risk consultancy domain. Thank you so much, Gautam, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Sumer, and all the best participants, debaters. Let's hope we have some high quality debate today on this amazing topic. All the very best to all of you.
Participants, before we begin, I'd like to familiarize you with a few rules. We have 6 minutes for constructive speeches in this round and 4 minutes for rebuttal speeches. A 1 minute indication will be given like this. Before your last minute starts, I'll be raising my hand like this. When your time is up, I'll be giving you a cut indication like this. When you have a cut indication, you have 10 seconds going to summarize. If you are for raising a POI, you have to raise your hand physically like this. Please raise your hand physically like this for a POI. If you're recognized, you have 15 seconds to articulate your question. If you're rejected, please wait for another 15 seconds to raise another POI. Debaters, while presenting, please look out for POIs. I request everybody to be on video. Please look out for POIs on the screen. If you see a POI, either say you'll be taking it or say you'll be rejecting it. If you do not recognize a POI, I'll have to stop you mid-speech, telling you that there's a POI on the floor. The first minute of each constructive and the last minute of each constructive are protective times. No POIs can be taken unless you yield your time in a protective minute to POIs after you're done with your speech. No POIs can be taken during rebuttal time. Any questions?
Yeah, in the previous round, we had a system where point of order was encouraged at the end of a speaker's time. Is that still valid here?
Points of orders can definitely be taken in between speeches.
In between speeches, like so you can interrupt.
Not during speeches.
Okay,
in between
fine.
speeches.
Yeah, all right.
In between speeches. In between the speakers,
Right.
you may raise a point of order. Yes, the punch.
Yeah, just a clarification. The speaking time is still 5 minutes, like the round of 16, right?
No. The constructive is 6.
All right, sure.
Rebuttal is 4. Constructive is 6.
Also, one last query with regards to the point of order. Like, what kind of metrics is the judge going to be taking into account with regards to validating the factual accuracy of a statement? Like,
points.
How does the esteemed judge intend to validate or devalidate a point of order raised on a certain subject?
The point of order for person who raises the point of order will be given 15 seconds to actually raise their point, articulate what exactly the point of order is, post which will be making the person who the point of order raised against, the debater who got a point of order raised against them, will be giving them 15 seconds to raise their side, and post which the adjudicator will rule on the point of order.
But seeing as it's a matter of factual accuracy of something, wouldn't it be more prudent to not have defense, because this is like something which is very exact? It's not going to be you can't raise a point of order in an opinion.
Okay, giving them a defense only so that they can probably cite their sources or convince us that they've taken it from a credible source.
All right, fair
and
enough.
Anyway, let's just say that even if it dangles around in a we don't know what is right yet situation, we assure you that the final scoring metrics will be finalized post debate after me and Sumer do a thorough check on whatever the point of order it is. So we'll be noting it all down. So you can be sure that points will be awarded and taken away based on factual accuracy.
And one last thing, it is going to have a quote and quote format, right? Like you'll have to quote whatever the speaker said and then the factual inaccuracy, right?
Definitely.
So misquotations are going to is it okay if it's not an exact quote, because it's obviously
it's okay if it's not an exact quote, but if it's a misquote, we'll definitely have to put it down.
Certainly, sir. That's good enough. Thank you.
Okay then. Thank you so much. May we please have the Prime Minister take the stage?
That'll be me. Do I have the dice?
Yes, I'll be doing a 3 to word backward count, post which you can begin your debate.
All right.
3, 2, 1, please begin.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. I, JP Kritan, I'm here to present my views on the subject. This House refutes the claim that a rise in the right-wing ideology of India has led to a rise in religious conflicts. Now, we should be going over a few key definitions which the proposition wants to put forth to lay down the premise of said debate. The first definition is what a political right-wing ideology refers to. It is a political ideology which states that a homogeneous society is not practical and hierarchical structures are bound to emerge and do exist in society. And as we can all agree, this is the reality of how life is. Secondly, we would also like to emphasize that we are still doing it within the domain, which is right-wing political ideology, as it says equality before law is still enforced, i.e. there is no inequality before law, there is no genocides, there is nothing of the sort happening. Secondly, the existence of a social ladder or hierarchy cannot be dismantled or disregarded as such while making decisions. And this is a key point and a key hinge point for political right-wing ideologies. Now, coming to the existence definition of a religious conflict, a conflict between two different religious civilian groups resulting in violence and potentially loss of life and property. Now, the reason we've emphasized the word civilian here is solely because that we want to exclude terrorist activity and insurgency and such, because those are not religious conflicts and those do not come under the purview of said debate, since it is a violation of on multiple levels and it causes several moral qualms. Now, coming to why this claim holds no water to begin with. Firstly, the ideology in itself cannot be blamed for crimes being committed. You cannot merely go about and say it was the ideology that caused people to do this. People cause people to do this. It is the person who has perpetrated the crime who has taken it upon himself to violate the law who should be blamed for it. It is not the ideology who can be blamed for it. It is the equivalent of saying Islam is the root cause of terrorism, when this is not the case. Terrorists are the root cause of terrorism. Secondly, bad apples, isolated incidents and such do not make an ideology responsible for their wrongdoings. Accountability and blame rise solely
There's a PY on the
perpetrator.
floor. Will you be taking it?
Yes, go ahead.
Considering the motion does not ask for you to defend right-wing ideology, please defend the case of rise of right-wing ideology in particular and not the ideology in and of itself. This debate doesn't function on whether right-wing or is
Vishnu,
good.
Vishnu, what is your point of information?
Yeah, defend the characteristic of why the rise of this particular ideology
Vishnu,
is good.
what is your question? Vishnu, what is your question?
If I'm asking him to make a statement, right? That's a question.
Sir, in my understanding of the language of English,
please articulate your question. What, how, comment, please. Can you please articulate your question?
Kindly comment on the rise of this particular ideology versus the ideological nature of this particular argument in and of itself.
Okay, I shall do so further down in my speech. Thank you, opposition, for your invalid point of information. Now, moving forth with what I was saying, bad apples and isolated incidents do not cause an ideology to be blamed for their wrongdoings. If somebody is doing something, the accountability lies on the perpetrator, does not lie on the ideology that made a perpetrator do something. That is like sympathizing with the perpetrator for a crime he did commit. Now, which in itself is again completely baffling. Now, the next point I would like to state is right-wing ideology, by emphasizing the fact that there is a heterogeneous society, there are going to be social divides, helps people come to terms with the fact that inequalities are a part of life and thus need to be tolerated. And therefore, it also decreases the probability that people subscribing to a right-wing ideology would act out violently. It's harder to instigate violence in instigate religious violence in people who follow a right-wing ideology. Now, even if there is a correlation, which there really isn't, it baffles me as to how there is a correlation. It does not imply causality. A correlation, if you're saying that rise of right-wing ideology has risen and religious conflicts have risen, which is not the case, even if it was, then it does not mean that one has led to the other. They could be completely mutually independent. Now, further, speaking about examples of when of how India as a nation has functioned. I'll take a POI.
ideology and human aspect of people supporting it can be mutually exclusive, then what is the whole point of people providing the social capital to the ideology in and of itself, which makes the movement? Otherwise, the movement won't even happen.
I would like to answer this question with a counter question, which is, does a movement have to have something to do with everything on planet Earth? The answer is simply no. It's not necessary for right-wing ideology to say something about religious conflicts for it to be bad. It is inherently understood that religious conflicts leads to violence and therefore is inherently bad. The right wing does not have to say anything on it, or does not have to justify the fact that the right wing does not have to justify whether or not the right wing leads to that. Ideology need not say anything on everything there is on the planet or everything there is under the sun. For instance, communism talks solely about economics, and it is widely recognized as a valid ideology. So I don't see the opposition's point of information again. Now, picking up where I left off, it absolutely baffles me as to how these claims have come about without any statistical backing, without any evidence of the same, and without anything proving causation. There is no major right-wing leader who has gone out and asked people to participate in religious conflict, who has gone out and been like, we need to do this, we need to do that. There's no instance of such. And yet, the political right wing has been blamed frivolously just because of, well, the few cases of religious violence which has happened. And it need not have anything, well, the right wing need not have anything to do with it in the first place. With this, I would like to rest my case.
Kritan, you have 22 seconds remaining. Would you like to indulge?
I'll lead it to point of information, sir.
Can we have a question, please? Deepansh, Vishnu, a question?
Yeah, so I just asked one POI. So when you go ahead and say that an ideology does not necessarily have to...
Apologies, sir, I couldn't hear you. Could you come again? I really wasn't unable to hear you.
Yeah, when you say that an ideology does not necessarily have to cover religious conflict, do you also agree that religious conflict can still be a part of an ideology, considering conservatism requires you not to change your thoughts, and these thoughts can also be religious in nature?
Yes, I do agree with the fact that an ideology can talk about religious conflict, but that is not the case with what the definition of a right-wing ideology is. And it is not necessarily true for most right-wing ideologies. And secondly, coming to the case where conservatism enforces you not to change your school of thought, it's just enforcing you not to change your school of thought. It's not asking you to go about and do and contribute to heinous crimes by any means whatsoever. Thank you.
Any points on the floor? None? Okay. May we please have the leader of the opposition?
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. I'll be giving you a backward count, post which you can begin your debate.
Great. I'll just set my timer first. Just give me 1 second.
Sure, not a problem. Okay then.
Whenever you're ready.
3, 2, 1. Please begin.
Mr. Speaker, the problem with the government side's debate and the large proportion of their first speech, I think, has absolutely no correlation to the debate, to the motion or the debate at hand, because simply their claims are twofold. Firstly, they very illogically say that, look, there is no causality between a particular randomized incident of violence versus the ideology that the violence, that the people who are belonging to that particular violence subscribe to. Secondly, they say that it's an individual mechanism and right wing is inherently good and people have to accept it. Let's first deal with extraneous rebuttals before moving on to positive constructives from side opposition. Firstly, I don't think that individuals can ever be separated from the ideology that they subscribe to. If that were the case, we would never have been able to hold Hitler accountable for the mass genocide that he had carried out, simply because everybody in the entire world could use the PM's case to justify Hitler's actions as being individualistic in nature, rather than comparing them to the Nazi ideology of mass extinction, and rather than comparing it to the ideology of, let's say, superior being over the others. If we were to follow the Prime Minister's speech today, we would end up in a world where people like Joseph Stalin, for example, could easily defend their entire genocidal maniac case by saying, oh, look, It's simply me doing my own responsible work. There's an absolutely absurd claim on their side of the house. But moreover, and another targeted piece of rebuttal goes something like this panel. At a point in time, not taken, sir. At a point in time, when a particular individual sees something on the media, sees something in their own televisions, and this is explicitly taking India into the particular context, we have major right-wing leaders, Mr. Speaker, called Kapil Sharma. We have P.A. Raja, who go on to public forums like WhatsApp, Twitter, and even in their own election campaign speeches, literally saying things like Muslims don't deserve a place in India. While when we had the CA NRC protests in Delhi itself, you had the BJP Legislative Assembly chief, Mr. Speaker, going ahead and campaigning in front of 100 people assembly, saying that every single person who belongs to the particular community should be ostracized and sent back to their original nation. We have no respect for them. At a point in time, when you're living in such a disastrous state, simply when there are no existing mechanisms with respect to stopping things like hate crime, we see things like hate speech from both sides of the house, both sides of the political spectrum rising every day, not taken. It is extremely, extremely pathetic of the Prime Minister to then say there is absolutely no religious tension in India. We think they're as good as the right-wing majority government that is working today. Moving on to positive argumentations from our side. We think firstly that when a particular political ideology conflicts itself to an inner emotion of a particular human being, it grows extremely strong and can possibly incite large amounts of violence coming out of it. The reason why the right wing has been on such a rise today, you see in the Ayodhya case, you see in the CA case, and even different legislative examples at that particular point in time, is because right wing inherently clings on to basic things like fear. The reason why BJP could win over northeastern states was by instilling a sense of fear of immigrants in them. The reason why BJP was able to win more assembly elections in the southern part of India was because we could instill into them a fear of destabilization from the current state government. The entire ideology of right wing, whatever good that they want to claim in PM speech, and literally this is garbage characterization from their side, when they come up to you and say, oh, right wing is all about distribution of powers. That's not the case. The ideology is how the people present it to be, not how it is in books. In present day context, right wing necessarily is attached with the propaganda of instilling fear and also clinging on to basic human tendencies like not changing. Moving on to my second constructive. We think that religious tension has only arisen because people who belong to that particular spectrum of society, i.e. the right-wing part, don't necessarily want to change. And the reason for that panel, and Mr. Speaker, is because they already have consolidated a large amount of power within the context of India. You have right-wing parties like the Bharatiya Janata Party and various other small local domestic parties also, who are currently either in power or are possibly in the future damn near guaranteed going to be. At that particular point in time, what incentive do these particular parties who are following a particular ideology? And remember, this debate doesn't happen upon textbook definitions of Karl Marx's communism. This debate happens upon the interpretation of people, of what people think of an ideology in the first place. That is how debate functions. This is not an MUN. At that particular point in time, we think two things happen. Firstly, there is no incentive mechanism to change or to listen to other people. Therefore, it leads to discontentment between different spectrums of the political ideology. At that particular point in time, Mr. Speaker, what happens is that it creates a cognitive dissonance between people who are not belonging to the same spectrum, which is to say, the chances of you coming onto a compromise is significantly lesser on side government because you have a rise in power of this particular right-wing government. At a point in time when there wasn't a rise, if you could look at the statistics of hate crime and hate speech back in 2001 or till 2007, it's very evident in India that it has been on the rise. And that is not me quoting a fact, because I don't think debates function on facts in and of the first place. What government needs to defend is to create an incentive mechanism for right-wing governments to change, and also tell us how individual is different from an ideology and defend Hitler on their side. Do so in DPM. Extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you so much.
Apologies, sir. I have 2 points of information, sir.
Points of actually, Kritin, his time
Sorry,
is up.
points of order, sir. Apologies. I missed
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
So the first point of order is wherein the leader of opposition said that my statements could be used to justify Joseph Stalin's genocidal and maniacal tendencies. So that firstly, Joseph Stalin never committed a genocide to begin with, so it in itself holds no water because he had no such
Ukraine
tendency.
1973. Check your
Please be recognized.
genocide.
Please be recognized. Please be recognized. Please finish, Kritin. Please finish.
Yeah, which is obviously not a genocide per se.
Vishnu,
It is the United Nations recognized genocide. I highly suggest you look up Google.
Okay, sir. Wasn't Joseph Stalin not in power during the time, sir? Ukraine 1975?
Yeah, I don't think you quite understood the argument. The argument operates on logic. People interpreted Joseph Stalin's version of communism to be inherently violent in nature and led on to a genocidal tendency in Ukraine. Therefore,
adjudicator, please rule. Adjudicator, please rule.
That could also justify Stalin's views on communism because people use that particular
Points noted. Vishnu, a leader of opposition.
It's not a fact. It's not a fact. It's a logical tendency argument based.
Kritin, your second point of information, point of order.
Yes, sir. Another point of order was wherein the leader of opposition said, and I quote, while quoting me, stated, there is absolutely no religious tension in India. Sir, this was mentioned nowhere in my speech and had no semblance of anything to my speech whatsoever, sir.
Vishnu, would you like to defend?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, even if that weren't the case, how does that impact the debate in any manner whatsoever? Right.
It's a misinterpretation of his. It's a misinterpretation of.
I accept, Mr. Prime Minister, that you might have said that there is some amount of religious tension. Cool. How does that affect the debate anyhow? I'm simply not aware.
Apologies, sir. Adjudicator, seeing as this time was supposed to be for the leader of opposition to put forward substantial sources, which he has done neither in this case.
No, I'll have to say, leader of opposition, that the Prime Minister did not mention that. So when you use that in your speech as something that he did mention, that is wrong. So
right,
you cannot later
Mr. Prime Minister, you did not say that there is zero religious tension in India.
Vishnu, please maintain decorum. Please maintain some decorum. Please just calm down, everybody. It's just a debate.
Exactly.
I have a small
One second.
Please.
1 second. Leader of opposition.
Yeah.
The debate quality is being brought down because of unnecessary aggressiveness. So if we could keep the fierce logic and points within the speeches, it would be of great use to the helping the quality of the debate. So yes, if you have something to say.
Just a small clarification. Aren't point of order supposed to be on factual things?
It's also on misinterpretation of one speech. We mentioned in our rule book. We mentioned our PDF which we have put on the website. It's for factual accuracy. Also in the workshop we mentioned it's also for misinterpretation of your own statement. We also learn points of order.
Could I clarify something further?
All right, we'll concede to that point of order.
Sir, one last thing, sir. My sincerest apologies. I know I'm holding everybody back here, sir. But regarding the first point of order raised by me, sir, seeing as Joseph Stalin was never in power in the example cited by the leader of opposition, and secondly, seeing as the USSR was on the verge of de-Stalinization during the time, sir, I don't think his fact makes any sense.
Prime Minister, adjudicator has ruled on this. You can bring up the logic in your rebuttal speech. The adjudicator has already ruled.
Points have been noted. If we could move on to the next.
Okay,
speech.
Apologies, sir. Sincerest apologies. I was not aware.
Prime Minister, we ruled it. I hope all points of orders have been ruled.
Yes, sir. I'm good. Thank you.
None more. Thank you so much, Leader of Opposition, for your speech. May we please have the member of the government for the second constructive.
Ready.
Are we giving you a backward count, post which you can begin?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So before coming to the constructive points, I'd like to point out that the points which are said by the Honorable Leader of Opposition mentioned the Nazi genocide carried out by Hitler in Germany and the alleged genocide performed by Stalin in Russia and the back then USSR. I think the motion that the domain in which we are operating we are talking about religious conflicts and in the domain of India. First of all, the genocide in USSR back then was not inherently a religious conflict. Even the persecution of Jews was not exclusive to Jews, but it was to all of the other communities as well, such as the gypsies, such as the gays, the disabled people. So it was not inherently a religious conflict, but rather a misinterpretation of the aforementioned hierarchical structures which exist in society. It was not about persecution of a religious group, but rather a group perceived as someone who was in the lower scale of the hierarchical structure and was perceived to be harmful to the nation. So I think that first of all, the USSR case doesn't qualify under the purview of the domain of religious conflict. Neither does it qualify under India, and same with the Nazi Germany case. Coming to the constructive points, as mentioned by the Prime Minister in his speeches, the root cause behind the perpetrators committing these crimes and causing destruction of life and property is not because of ideology. More often than not, if you notice, it is the economic, social, environmental, and other factors in the society which influence them, which instigate them to carry out these acts of violence. You can see acts of violence performed on both sides of the wing. Even people who have
there's a point of information on the
knowledge.
floor. Will you be taking it?
Yeah, I'd be taking it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you just mentioned right now that these acts of violence are happening due to economic, but specifically social environment conditions, right? Do you think social environment conditions do not include religious aspects?
Yeah, so I would say that economic, social, and environmental factors will be there in equal regard. And by social, of course, the religious point is part of it. And religious persecution, what I was trying to say is that religious persecution and the inciting of hatred of a fellow human being on the basis of religion, this inciting part happens only because the prerequisites are satisfied. That is, that the environmental, the social, the economical conditions are not good. Also, the people who are committing these crimes, these people are more often than not even aware of the ideologies to whom they are allegedly subscribed to. And I wouldn't say that these people would be the poster child of those said ideologies. Having said that, I'd also like to point out some examples which have happened under states or under regions controlled by leaning towards the left. We all know of the violence that has been happening in West Bengal, which has been under the rule of leftists for almost 50 years. Until 2011, when Mamata Banerjee defeated the communists. And I have to say that even Mamata Banerjee herself ascribes to the left, is more towards the left rather than towards the right or the center. We all know of the violence carried out in the West Bengal states. Even in states like Kerala, there's religious conflicts happening despite the state being ruled by left-leaning governments. And you would say that a left-leaning ideology is the dominant force in that state. So again, to reinforce the point, it is not the ideology which is the root cause of religious conflict, but it is the factors, the other factors, the environmental, social, economical factors which cause this. Also, India right from its birth has been embroiled in religious conflicts, irrespective of which ideology was on the rise or was prevalent at that time. It's not the ideology, but the historical and the social baggage which we carry that leads to this conflict. There are numerous examples. Take the example of the 1947. Right from the first year, we had religious conflicts on major scale. The national leaders at that point of time, Jawaharlal Nehru, he espoused left-leaning values. He was the poster child of socialist values, and still he couldn't prevent this violence. Again, 1984, after the assassination of Indira Gandhi, there was persecution, the Sikhs were targeted and they were killed in the streets of Delhi and all over India. Again, the perpetrators themselves were leftist leaders. They were Congress leaders. The leaders were supposed to espouse the socialist and left-leaning values. Again, 1993, the riots that happened in Mumbai. Again, the Congress government was at power in the state back then. And even nationally, the Congress government was in power. So again, to reiterate the fact, it is not the ideology, but it's the people who are incited to cause this religious conflict and violence. Let us now come to some of the facts which the Honorable, I'll take your POI. Please go ahead.
What is the biggest impact of the rise in a particular ideology in a country like India?
Okay. So the motion here clearly asks us to refute the claim that the rise of right-wing ideology has led to a rise in religious conflict. Your claim is that there is a causality between the rise of right-wing ideology leading to religious conflicts. We are refuting the claim on two fronts. The first is any ideology, be it right-wing or left-wing, its rise does not cause a rise in religious conflicts. And now I was actually about to come to the point that this claim of rise in religious conflicts, that is not true. Let me quote some facts from a publication called NDTV, which is known quite popularly to be a left-leaning source. And I'd say that the facts which I'm about to quote should be acceptable to opposition. The maximum number of incidents that took place of religious conflicts in India were reported in 2008 under the rule of UPA government, the UPA-1 government. Again, in the years between 2004 and 2008, which are again the ruling years of UPA, there were 3,858 incidents of communal riots. But in between the similar period of 2014 to 2017, only 2,920 communal riots happened, which is far less in comparison to the UPA regimes. Now, hence the claim that a rise in religious conflicts has also been refused categorically. Now, another point which I'd like to state, is my time over?
Yes, please summarize.
Yeah. So to summarize, I'd like to reiterate that the root causes are not the ideology, but the economic and social constraints, and also the claim that a rise in right-wing ideology has led to a rise in religious conflicts is not true, and also the claim that there is a rise in religious conflict itself has been refuted based on the facts which I just quoted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any points on the floor?
Yeah, I think there's a point of order from our side. Like, we weren't absolutely clear on this, so this might be a little bit of a confusing, but the speaker right now claimed that NDTV is a left-leaning channel. The problem we have is, firstly, that is largely disputable, but anyway, on no record does NDTV claim to be a left-leaning channel. At best, you can say that it's an opinion.
Pranav, member of government, please defend.
Yes. If I were to quote myself, I'd say it's largely known. I didn't say that as a matter of certainty, and it's open to interpretation. I'd say that the adjudicator and other members are open to interpretation, and they take a just call on this matter.
Adjudicator, please rule.
No, again, Pranav did mention that largely known is the word that he used. So again, we cannot really refute that as a point of factual inaccuracy when he himself said that it's largely known. So again, open to interpretation, and points have been noted here.
Thank you so much. May we please have the member of the opposition for the second constructive. Dipansh, are you ready?
Yeah, am I audible?
No, there's a huge lag.
Oh, all right. Can you hear me now?
Now it's much better.
All right.
Okay, I'll be giving you a backward count. Adjudicator, should we proceed?
Dipansh, can you say something? 1 second, I need to be sure I can hear you before you start.
Yeah, can you hear me clearly now?
Okay, there's a bit of a lag, but if it does persist, we'll have to probably ask you to stop and start over or continue from where you left off. But for now, yeah, you can get started.
Okay, right. Then 3, 2, 1, you may begin your debate.
There's a lag for me over here, like I couldn't see the countdown. So
no
can
problem.
I just reset my network once, and then I'll...
Sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there's still a lag, and your video is also lagging, but I guess you'll have to make do.
Apologies, sir, but if it helps the debate, sorry, small consideration from my side, sir. If it helps the debate, sir, if the lag is reduced by Mr. Deepan's turning off his video, perhaps we could do that.
Perhaps a few of us could turn off our videos, adjudicator.
No.
Even that would help the
Or sir, if I think it would be easier if Dipansh turned off his video, because then there's less bandwidth being consumed on his side. So just a suggestion, sir. Again,
No, I mean,
Wow.
I'd prefer to see him make his statement. So again,
yes,
yeah,
sir.
like
So
like if the rest of if the rest of y'all could just turn on your video whenever you have a
then,
POI.
points of information. Okay, fine. Yeah, fine. Sorry.
All right.
When you have a POI, perfect.
Yeah, let me just turn off my video.
Yeah, I think that would be better.
All right. Can you hear me now? Is it
Yes,
clearer?
it's a bit clearer.
All right. Now you can start the countdown. Please.
Okay then. 3, 2, 1. Please begin.
Panel, side government will lose this debate simply because they fail to even envisage a world where there is a possibility of right-wing communities actually propagating a violence or having a role in propagating violence, right? And we'll tell you exactly why that is the case. Right away, I think right from the very outset, the first speaker inherently talked about how we can't bring up exceptional examples. But I think in the second speech itself, they might talk about exceptional examples of states which have left-leaning parties in power. But we are not going ahead against their fact, but rather we will tell you exactly why on ideological basis this is wrong, right? Because it doesn't matter who is in power. The motion is simple. As long as there is a rise in right-wing ideology, is this creating a problem by propagating violence in the form of religious communal hatred or violence in and of itself? It doesn't matter whether the people in power are the instigators of this violence or the counter narrative of the minority are the people who are the instigators of this violence. We think on principle, it is a very ridiculous argumentation for them to make that communal violence is only started off by the kind of majority that is in power and the state that necessarily is in power. But secondly, they go ahead and talk about how because these people are unaware of what they're doing, even if they're doing it under the garb of religion, we don't think religion has to be held responsible for it or their ideology has to be held responsible for it, right? Firstly, we've been continuously asking them, when you go ahead and say the social aspects are dominant in nature, is religion and is your ideology not a part of that social aspect? They don't go ahead and engage with that, right? But more importantly, religion has to play a part, because when you go ahead and say that ISIS in the name of terrorism is going ahead and propagating for the reason for them to go ahead and hire terrorists, they go ahead and propagate religious ideologies. I do understand that these people don't go ahead and understand religious scriptures to the extent that priests do, but you can't absolve the fact that there is religious involvement serving as the motivating factor for these people, right? And this is where I think their whole characterization of right-wing ideologies is very questionable. When Vishnu makes it very clear to you what exactly right-wing ideologies are. But in their most purest sense, we think they refer to you not being able to change your orthodox or your generally backward mindset, right? You believe in the traditional values at all points of time. And currently, what does it look like? Synonymous of not accepting of different religions at all points of time. And we are going ahead and telling you that in terms of policies that's also happening in the legal sphere are now having religious connotations attached to it. Whether they are positive or negative, we are not taking that into consideration, but they do. Yes, your POI.
Yes, sir. Do you not understand that there can be a right-wing ideology which is inherently free of religion, therefore does not lead to religious conflict, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there can be a right-wing ideology free of religion, but there isn't. That is what I'm going ahead and telling you, right? There can be the possibility of it, but that necessarily doesn't happen in the status quo. How is that necessarily true? Now I'm not taking any more POIs. Firstly, where you have a mindset wherein you're not necessarily ready to give in to change, you are hesitant to do that, there is more space for radicalism to go ahead and propagate. That is where we tell you when there is a dearth of liberal ideas, necessarily you go ahead and compromise on the ideas of diplomacy and constructive criticism, right? Because you think that at all points of time, your ideology is the one that needs to be considered and that you are right. Considering all of that, if there are certain doctrines in the religion that were earlier laid out for that environment but have to now be interpreted, you are not necessarily ready to bring about a change in your ideology in and of itself. What does this then look like? People wanted to preserve old religious doctrines and ideologies at all points of time, not ready to give in to the changes that have come about in the society over time. What does that look like? Because traditions have changed, principles of liberty and equality have started being propagated since most states started to go towards a democratic setup, right? What does this inherently talk about? If Hinduism has caste system established within that, if Islam says that if you don't follow Allah, you are not on the right path in your life, we think these are largely problematic things that people will now have to necessarily go ahead and align themselves with when they're really right wing aligned with, right? Considering all of that, changes in society are either not happening or are either happening negatively in nature. Why is that? Because there will be always certain amount of people who will be advocating for feminism, which might or might not go against your religion. There will be people who will always be advocating for alleviating the situation of the Dalits in India, considering that this might go against the caste system that the Hindu Varna system propagates. All of this will lead to communal tension. All of this will lead to a religion going against the other, right? How are you going to look at it in the form of this? Triple talaq was something that was ruled out in the court of law, but the jury, one majority, consisted of a lot of people who did not want triple talaq to be there in the first place. People all over social media, specifically Hindus, celebrated that the triple talaq was a factor that was taken away from the society. At that point of time, you had Muslims calling out and having violent acts against these individuals, right? We think at all points of time, when you've got right-wing beliefs existing in a country, you will necessarily have to make certain compromises in terms of them going ahead and wanting to preserve the sanctity of their religion in and of itself. We tell you that at a point where you go ahead and offend people through your orthodox ideologies that you don't want to compromise upon, there will be religious conflict and there will be violence inherently coming about, because there is no communal harmony and there is no incentive for you as an orthodox individual to give in to the benefits that the minority wants to claim for themselves. Thank you so much.
I have a small clarification. Replies happen first for opposition and then for government?
Yes.
And it has a 4 or 5 minute?
4 minute rebuttal. Devansh, you have 10 seconds remaining. Would you like to take a POI?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Any POI? Sure.
Yes, sir. And now that the member of opposition has brought about the case of ISIS, sir, does the member of opposition believe that Islam was the sole reason that ISIS came about in the first place, sir? Or is it that he understands that there are other factors at play here, sir?
Of course, there are other factors at play. The motion is about whether the right-wing ideology of Pakistan plays a factor in instigating violence. And that is exactly what I'm saying. The right-wing ideology of Pakistan says you go ahead and support Islam at all points of time, which is now manipulated by people. And therefore, inherently, the source point of all of the problem is the religion itself.
Thank you so much, Member of Opposition, for your speech. May you please have the LO for the first rebuttal?
Sir, are points suspended during the rebuttal speeches, sir? I.e., can a point of information be raised on a rebuttal speech, sir?
Points of information cannot be raised in a rebuttal speech. If you have points of orders, you may raise it right now or after the speaker's speech.
All right, sir. Thank you.
I have a point of order, so may I go?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So the deputy leader of opposition right now claimed that the motion is about how right-wing ideology in Pakistan or the radical Islamism in Pakistan is the domain of the motion. I think that is inaccurate and that is not under the domain or purview of the said motion.
Devansh, would you like to defend?
No, I think I exactly said this, that the motion talks about right-wing ideologies playing a part in instigating violence. And then I gave an example with Pakistan because, of course, he asked me a question regarding ISIS, which largely operates in Pakistan. So I just answered that in the context. I think I literally said that motion talks about really the right-wing ideologies instigating violence, and therefore a religious or an ideological aspect is one of the aspects that play a part in it.
Adjudicator, please rule.
Points noted. Can we move on to the rebuttal speeches, please?
Okay, thank you. Leader of opposition, are you ready? Okay then.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Sir, might we utilize this 1 second to talk about ISIS in Pakistan, sir? Apologies. I was just being informed. Sincerest apologies.
Right, whenever you're ready.
3, 2, 1, please begin.
Mr. Speaker, I'll make this debate extremely easy for you to adjudicate who to give. When I ask their Deputy Prime Minister a very easy question, and the question is as follows. What do you think is the major impact of the rise of a particular ideology in a country? To which their answer was simply repeating the motion and the stand which they take with respect to the motion. We on side opposition have consistently claimed over the past two speeches that the most important impact of the rise of any particular political ideology leading to any political spectrum for that particular matter, especially given the context of India, which it will immediately result in people feeling very passionately, very strongly about this particular ideology. There are multiple reasons that I gave to you why this would happen in my own speech. Firstly, it's because it's going to play inherently on people's most favorite emotions like fear, things like not wanting to part away with their old ideologies, things like not wanting to give in to newer customs, etc., etc. At that particular point in time, the definition of this particular ideology does not remain constrained within the textbook definitions that government would want you to believe. At that particular point in time, the starting point of this debate becomes the interpretation of this particular form of, let's say, ideology that is currently been prevailing in the country. Within the context of India, we've given you multiple lines of characterization, Mr. Speaker, as to why this is inherently violent in nature and could also and is also resulting in propagating violence to begin with. The reason for that is follows, and this is what Dipansh also extensively talked about, and I also, given that there exists an incentive structure in India in terms of institutions and otherwise of these particular political parties or these particular leaders not wanting to change, not wanting to give in into any other form of compromise, which is necessary for you to scale down religious tension and to scale down things which are happening in status quo. When that requirement isn't getting fulfilled, there's a high probability, and in most instances, the only outcome is that it's going to be directly affected. At a point in time, panel, when individuals are interpreting that particular, let's say, ideology in and of itself, which also comes about from that particular ideological nature of religion, which especially Dipansh talks to you about with respect to how ISIS functions largely based on a particular religious principle, but converting it into something that the people that is much more palatable to the individuals and that is much more sellable with respect to advertisement, etc., etc. Something which causes the rise of right-wingism even in the first place. With that as the context, we have zero material in refutation from government. All we have is them giving some statistical data that suggests that there was some form of religious violence in UPA-led India also. Again, the point of this debate is not UPA versus NDA. The point of this debate is to prove to you that left is not as good as right or right is not as good as left. The point is that in current day India 2020, there are certain things on the rise which are directly correlating to things like violence in this particular country. Had this debate been largely about which particular form of governance is best to employ, probably government would take 1 point in that. But given that we are not sitting in parliament right now, deciding how the next fiscal policy is going to come about, we think we win this debate by a very high margin. In order to close out the debate even further, let me deal with some of the moralistic claims that they do with respect to the individual not being attached to a particular agenda to begin with. The example of Hitler and Stalin was not of Indian context. I don't think they can understand logic. But moving on, it is to simply juxtapose what's happening with respect to Amit Shah and Modi in India. That's the comparative. That's the logic that you have to understand in order to refute. Given all of those things, extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you so much, Leader of Opposition, for summarizing your debate. Thank you so much, Member of Opposition, for being part of this debate. Can you please have the Prime Minister for the closing rebuttal, post
yes,
which I'll be taking,
ready.
before which I'll be taking any points of orders on the floor. Are there any points of orders on the floor?
None whatsoever.
Okay. I'll be giving you a 3 to 1 backward count, post which you can begin your debate.
So I'll have 4 minutes, right, sir?
Yes.
Thank you.
3, 2, 1, please begin.
Well, the opposition needs to start understanding how a democracy functions. A democracy functions based on people voting into power a party or a political party whose ideology they support. Therefore, the rise of right-wing political parties is directly linked with the rise of an ideology in India. I fail to fathom how the opposition can go about and try to refute this claim. Secondly, well, the they brought about the example of Adolf Hitler to as a pattern. Sir, might I remind you, sir, that at the Nuremberg trials, it wasn't the Nazism as an ideology that was on trial. It was the Nazis who were on trial. It was the people who carried out crimes in the name of an ideology who are on trial. And they are to be blamed. It is not an ideology which can be blamed for anything and everything as such. Sir, further, sir, religious tension, like causes people to not want, like religious tension because people do not want to change. This is like the case of rising never came into the picture as such because religious tension has been there in India since day one, sir, as we had concluded earlier. Sir, further I would like to add that the member of opposition would be an extremely extraordinary candidate at the US presidential election, sir, because since he's just as confused as the rest of them, sir. Sir, he brought about an example of ISIS and Pakistan, sir, which absolutely baffles me to this date. And further, he aligns right-wing ideology with the religion, sir. He says that a religion needs to have an ideology. But sir, that is not the case. A religion is a religion and an ideology is an ideology. And in fact, it is a very dangerous train of thought to go down your religion being your ideology, sir. It is what leads to extremism in the first place. Now, sir, secondly, the opposition brought about the case of, secondly, sir, the opposition failed to acknowledge the fact that there are non-majority right-wing parties in the nation, sir. For example, the AIMIM and such are political ideologies, do follow political ideologies, which are not majoritarian right-wing, sir. They are right-wing, they're just not aligned with the majority. And they completely fail to fathom the existence of such a thing. Sir, they went about on a tangent speaking on how individuals represent their ideology. Sir, individuals do not represent an ideology, sir. Individuals represent individuals. It is hypocritical for anything to be blamed other than an individual for a certain crime being committed, sir. Sir, further in his first speech, sir, the leader of opposition spoke about, well, I laud him for this, sir. He says that he agreed with me saying that the religious conflicts were randomized. Sir, I do not understand where opposition's case lied the whole time, sir, and I completely fail to understand what sort of like how ignorant you need to be in order to refute the fact that the rise of a certain political party is directly linked with the rise of a certain ideology, sir. And sir, the opposition put forward a case of a case and a model where people are treated as illiterates as if they're sitting with their sticks and stones underneath their cot and waiting to wake up to just go and beat somebody up in a religious conflict. So this is absolutely not the case. People themselves are sensible. And if you wish to question this, sir, they are questioning the very principles of democracy, sir. And it baffles me as to how opposition kept on laying on us for having textbook definitions of such and then failed to back any of their observations up with facts or any genuine explanation of any sort, sir. Their points were so invalid that they did not have any real life examples. They kept on saying that we were talking about an idealistic world while they themselves rested in their own idealistic world. The hypocrisy in this is honestly baffling, and I'm appalled to have to explain something as simple as the Nuremberg trials to the opposition. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for summing up the argument from the proposition side. Thank you so much, Member of Government, for being part of this debate. Very fiery debate from both parties. Thank you so much. Yes, points of order.
I have since we're having point of orders, can I ask a point of order?
Sure.
Yeah, it is with respect to, I think in their reply speech, in their refute, in their rebuttal speech, which happened just now, the speaker very conveniently said that the Nuremberg trials did not hold a particular ideology to an authority, right? They did not hold a particular ideology accountable. It held individuals like Hitler, etc., accountable. Like just clarifying that was the statement, right? I'm on the right track.
Yes, it held Nazis accountable and not Nazis.
Yeah. So I'm going to read to you the document released after Nuremberg trials, and this is a quotation coming from trials. Okay, they said.
Could you please share your screen?
I'll send the link on WhatsApp.
Okay.
The Nuremberg trials declare the Nazi ideology as being anti-Semitic and racist following the laws of Nuremberg in Germany, Berlin on 15th September 1935. They go on to say that the Nazi ideology is a criminalistic ideology preventing things like extramarital intercourse between Jews and Germans, preventing things like cross education between Jews and Germans. It cannot be allowed to continue in its present form in the world. That is the definition which Nuremberg trials had. I am extremely surprised that this is a basic fact that the speaker could not grasp.
Adjudicator, please rule.
Points noted.
Sir, I was not given an instant to defend myself, sir.
Okay, please defend yourself. Apologies.
Sir, I believe the opposition has misinterpreted my statement, sir. I said it was the Nazis who were on trial. I did not speak on whether or not Nazism as an ideology was on trial. An ideology inherently cannot be on trial.
Yeah, it was actually.
It was not the ideology.
No, it was.
Adjudicator, please rule. Adjudicator, please.
Can I continue asking another point of order, please?
First, let's rule on this one.
At least for this one, I'd like to say that your specific words on this one. I mean, I understand that you can't put an intangible like an ideology on trial. But then, based on what he said, we will verify that source later. If that stands to be true, then it is directly against what you said, and it will stand. So. But so can we quickly move on to the second point of order without further discussion on this one? Vishnu, you have a second point of order?
Yeah. It is with respect to how, like what the statement that they gave just in, let's say, reply to my point of order, saying that you cannot have an ideology standing up on platform. That is factually incorrect. The Nuremberg trials, also the Tokyo trials, literally held things like the banning of plastic, the banning of plastic commission in the Tokyo committee. We had the ideology on stand, which is to say that
again,
the ideology
Vishnu, do you have a point of order in specific to his speech and not to his reply to the answer that you gave?
No, I don't have any. I don't think the speech had facts that would be counted.
Apologies, sir. If I might get one last word in, sir. Sir,
yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I very categorically stated that it was not an ideology on trial. It was people who perpetrated crimes in name of that ideology on trial. Sir, I very categorically said that. I don't even understand how this interpretation of it is still valid.
All right, got it.
Yeah, I also
that was
have
the
a point of order.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is something that they didn't say as something that is generally known or considered. They explicitly made a statement. People vote on the basis of ideology. Therefore, the direct rise of a political party is linked to the rise of the ideology. I don't think every individual in the country votes on the basis of a political ideology. I voted for BJP just because I have more electricity 24 hours. I have no idea what the ideology is. So why can he make a generalization of that sort?
Please rule, Prime Minister. Sorry, Prime Minister, please defend.
Sir, it was an opinion, sir. I don't understand how an opinion is subject to a point of order in the first place, sir.
Adjudicator, please rule.
It was an opinion. We can't say like this. The same way, Vipansh, you can raise that question. He can get back to you by saying, no, that's what I believe. You can say that's what you believe. So points noted. I think we should conclude at this point.
Yeah, just one last thing. Like they quoted my speech when they went ahead and said that I said religion has to have an ideology. I think rather what I stated was that that religion is a part of a right wing. I did not necessarily say that religion has to have an ideology, but rather religion is one of the parts of an ideology.
Prime Minister, please defend.
Apologies, sir. I do not fully understand how it is a point of order. There's no quotation. There is very clear misinterpretation and taking off on a tangent here.
You said that religion.
Sir, can I
said religion
at least have 15 seconds of speech time to defend myself, sir?
Please defend yourself.
I'm not asking for much, sir. Sir, I don't understand how you can pick up something and then just go off on a tangent and be like, yeah, I said this, so this, I said this. Sir, it's not even a proper quotation, sir. Baffles me, honestly.
Adjudicator, please rule.
Again, Dipansh, it would be beneficial if you could say exactly what he said so that it's beneficial for all of our understanding. So it
Yeah,
will not
because-
stand unless you can
because-
specifically
yeah,
mention.
yeah.
what he-
Yeah. So after he said that a member of opposition baffles me, this was what he said, and I quote: "Religion has to have an ideology," which is not the exact quote that I had presented.
If I please, if I may intervene, I heard, I have looked at the Panch facial reaction when Prime Minister was stating this. I think what the Panch mentioned in his speech was that right-wing ideology sort of like a subset of religion, and that sort of extrapolates the points of religion forward. But what Prime Minister sort of put forward is that the Panch mentioned that religion has an ideology, which is where the line is drawn. I think that's what am I correct, the Panch?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I think.
I-
Adjudicator would like to rule.
Points noted. Points noted, guys. Like, we should wrap up at this point. I mean, unless you guys have more point of orders.
I for one am done.
Okay then.
No, I think we are sure.
Adjudicator, can we have some feedback, some closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not going to the content of most things. Again, both teams are pretty good. That's why we had so much of a conflict, that's for sure. Otherwise, it would have just been one team dominating and things just getting over that way. So both teams are pretty good. Only thing is, at least in the beginning where Sumer and I had to intervene to say, let's calm down and all of that, that shouldn't happen ideally. Again, this is an open debate at a college level and all of that. It shouldn't come to the adjudicator and the organizers coming and having to say, hey guys, calm down and all that. That actually brings down the value. Like when you think back at the debate, like you don't want to think back on how some people lost it and stuff. Like again, like you guys have to, get a hold of yourself. I understand it happens in a topic like this, especially, debates, as much as they're about coming to the final crux, proving somebody wrong, giving your constructives, you can't openly question whenever you want to in a debate. And when you have so much material, it's very disheartening to know how could he say that? I have so much to say against it, but I can't. But you have to still wait for that final speech. Like if Dipansh really has something to say, he needs to tell it to Vishnu to bring it up in the final rebuttal speech. That's the structure of things. So first of all, like the debating decorum as such could have improved. Apart from that, things like Stalin and Hitler and all of that, which is supposed to be an example, a parallelism that is drawn, quickly get the point of it and move on, literally became a substantial section of the debate, which should not have been. Like it should have just been oh, okay, cool, they said that, okay, I feel it's wrong, cool, move on, finish it. Instead of that, it was literally there from every speech from the first time it was mentioned till all POIs, POOs, like the bloody rebuttal speech had Stalin and Hitler and USSR and all that. So you guys kept revolving around things that didn't come under the purview of the debate just to prove the other people wrong. But many times I would suggest leave the judgment of is this relevant or not after a certain level to the adjudicator. Believe that this dude is probably smart enough to realize this is bullshit and move on to your constructives. That way I know that you're the smarter category of things that says, I know what is my primary focus in this debate. Let me speak of that. But when I see all of you having this upward battle of no, he said it, I have to prove it wrong. It's like, I'm like, okay, carry on. Like, let's screw this debate and talk about Hitler for some time. Like, so that happened, and Nuremberg trials and like very unnecessary tangents that we shouldn't have taken. But all right, like in terms of quality, content, and the way you guys went about things, even though the decorum was sacrificed a bit, the fierce levels of the debate was good to see. So well done to all of you.
Sir, might we bother you for personal feedback, like for each of us, if that's not too much trouble?
Yeah, like if you're personally interested in it, please reach out to the organizers. They'll give you my number. I have noted down points for each of you. I'll be happy to help.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, and also Pranav, like I feel like after a certain point, it became Vishnu and Dipansh versus Kritin. You could have pitched in a bit more. I feel like you have high points for debating decorum, but that came with your silence, right? Like at a certain point, it felt like, like
I tried to raise a couple of POIs, but I was denied by Dipansh. And like both or three of my POIs were denied. Also, the rebuttal speech was to be done by the Prime Minister, not by the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying, like, it just felt like there was an imbalance because at least Vishnu and Dipansh, both of them decided they won't shut up. Like, they're gonna go all out on this one. So again, like,
I feel there were way too many POIs and POs in this debate. I think cumulatively, this debate had more POIs and POs than the other debates we had, and I think that is why I didn't get as much a chance to participate.
Yeah, and again, I also noticed that, the one time when you had multiple questions to ask, Dipansh said, sorry, not in the mood at this point.
So
but yeah, it happens. But good job, all of you.
Yeah. Thank you.